Hello everybody, my name is Michael with RetroVive Repairs, and today we have more of a rebuild video rather than a repair video. So as you can see, what I have here is a 2000 Nintendo Game Boy Advance that is in probably the worst shape I've ever seen. It was actually in significantly worse shape when I got it. I'll throw some pictures up here for you. But I was able to get it working, but this level of corrosion on the board is absolutely atrocious. You can see there's rust, all sorts of corrosion. I'm sure this console has been in some sort of flood. It's a miracle that it even still works. Now, you might notice that the chips are missing. That is because I did transfer them to a new motherboard. So, I have here a funny playing motherboard replacement. Now, this isn't so much of a review on this, however, I will be talking about it in a little bit. However, I did take the chips out of this and put it into this console. I actually was able to get this console working miraculously on this board. I'm not quite sure how, but it did work. But this level of corrosion is just too severe, even with a trip through like an ultrasonic cleaner or something like that. These contacts are just gone. These buttons are completely rusted. This extension port is gone. It's just, and even if I were to get rid of all the rust, who knows? There may be some underlying damage on this board that I'm just not 100% sure. Something could go wrong later in years as the corrosion expands, even if I get rid of all of it. So I just decided to go ahead and give it a brand new motherboard, so that way we don't have to worry about that. And look how fantastic this looks, honestly. So this is the funny playing Game Boy Advance, their version of a PCB replacement. So it does not come with these chips installed. You actually have to remove them from the old motherboard and put them on. So if you're not handy with micro soldering and a microscope and just fine solder work in general, this is not a beginner level repair. But I was able to do it with minimal incidences, and this board does work fantastic. Now, this isn't a video on this board so much, but I will be talking about it a little bit. It does have some LEDs on it and some more advanced features like a built-in audio amplifier. Also, it has a purple motherboard as well as gold contacts on just about everything to give it a more modern and premium feel. It does feel that way, and I really do like how this thing looks. But this video is not really about this. What we actually are going to be talking about is the rebuild that we're going to be doing for this entire console. So we are going to go ahead and get this thing completely rebuilt and into a new case, all sorts of fun things, give it a complete refurbishment, and I'll be talking about each of the products as I go. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is this crystal purple case from Thesesus. I believe that's what they call it. The exact name of it, I'll put it right here. But this is a clear purple case from Thesesus. It feels very premium and very nice. Honestly, a lot of these molds that you get from other companies, they don't click into place as nice. They don't feel right, if that makes sense. You can just tell it wasn't made properly. It's difficult to put into words in front of a camera, but this just feels right, if that makes sense. Now with this kit, it actually does come with some black buttons. However, I will actually be opting for clear black instead. This is just a choice due to the LEDs that are on this board, and I would like to take full advantage of those. So we're going to have a clear black buttons here that are also from Thesesus, as well as their clear membranes that they sell on site as well. One last thing to note about the purple case is that it also does come with a USB-C battery cover in case you want to USB-C mod it later. I may opt for that, but at the current moment, I'm just going to use AA batteries. Now, we are going to also be installing a Thesesus clean screen. However, this is as you can see by the case, a laminated clean screen. Now, as of the time of filming this, these laminated clean screens are actually discontinued by Retro6. I talked to Luke, and he did say that there just wasn't enough of a demand for them in order to make the next batch of 1,000, but I was able to get my hands on this laminated one and this case. But if you want to go ahead and order a clean screen for yourself, it will be the non-laminated version, unless in the future Luke decides to make a laminated version again if the demand is high enough. Now, the good thing about this, like I said, pausing again, like I said, I have handled this stuff earlier, so the fingerprints and stuff are not from Retro6. That is 100% my gross fingerprints and my workbench that is arguably too dirty. I'm actually going to use this DigiKey anti-static mat. Now, your clean screen will fit perfectly in the laminated clean screen case, like so. However, the install is a little bit different for the non-laminated ones that they are currently selling. However, in my case, it just fits right in right here. And the clean screen kit also comes with a 40-pin adapter as well as a 32-pin adapter. These Game Boy Advance models have both 32-pin and 40-pin revisions of this screen connector here, so it is very nice that the Retro6 team did include both adapters, so that way you can just connect it to this board. This is the main powerhouse of the screen here. This is the classic Retro6 white. I always think that Retro6 motherboards look very premium, and they just feel, like you're getting a piece of quality tech, honestly. Retro6 also does include a wire-free install ribbon here that you can just solder these points really quick, and so that way you don't have to worry about soldering the wires for the control board on this. However, since mine is an aftermarket motherboard, I'm not sure how well this will work. Let me take a quick look. So there is a small incompatibility issue here with this motherboard. Unfortunately, because this Funny Playing motherboard is a complete redesign, this ribbon will not actually work with it. However, this is not Retro6's fault or Funny Playing's fault. It's just two different companies that didn't really have each other in mind when designing a product, and that's neither one of their fault. It's just a compatibility issue that I wanted everyone to be aware of if they're doing this exact thing that I am doing. However, the good thing is that Funny Playing does have select, left, and right, which also happens to perfectly line up with the left, select, right, and ground pads on this. So all we'll have to do is run some wires from the select, left, right, and ground, and select left, right, and ground here, and we should be able to hook the control up for this screen fairly easy. Went ahead and cut the little protective strip that goes on the back of this metal screen here, so that way it doesn't make contact with any of the components on the motherboard here and short them out. So we've got that installed, and now we're going to go ahead and do the install for this screen. This Funny Playing motherboard does use a 32-pin port, so we're going to go ahead and use the 32-pin ribbon adapter that came with the kit. Going to install it like this, and then just install it into our board down here. It's a pretty straightforward process, which I really appreciate. And then we just go ahead and install our main ribbon from the screen into the motherboard here and flip it over like so. And that's really it for the install of the clean screen. It's pretty straightforward. You don't have to have the on-screen menu if you don't want, which is something I do like. However, we do want the on-screen menu, so in this case, you would either use the wire-free install. However, since we cannot, we're going to have to get a little bit creative here. Applying 3 volts to our battery contacts here from a bench power supply. Would you look at that? Screen looks good, motherboard looks good, everything is as expected. So we're going to go ahead and continue with the install. So because this ribbon is not compatible with this board, I am going to have to get a little bit creative. However, I did notice that there are select left and right test pads on this board, as well as select left and right test pads on this board. So I'm hoping if I just connect these two with some wire that I have here, this should get the functionality going. One thing I'm also noticing about this clean screen is just how versatile it is. I mean, the team over there really took their time, really. I mean, I'm not 100% sure what these programming pads are for. There's a test pad here, as well as debugging, which I'm sure is really useful for them, but also if they were to publish the resources, which I believe Retro6 does, they could really help you troubleshoot any issues that you have with these boards, making them really repairable. So I do appreciate that as well as how everything is labeled. There's even a disable menu button, disable menu right here. And knowing Retro6 boards, I believe if you were to bridge this, it would just disable the menu entirely, disabling the programming chip, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I do know that Retro6 does put two pads together like this, and if you bridge them, it will usually do the function that it is listing here. I also just want to take some time to notice just how well everything is labeled. It's really well put together, honestly. Even today, you know, with modern boards that aren't labeled that well, nothing is labeled, you can still do boards like this that are labeled and are easy to read and understand for the average technician. I mean, I don't know how this was all put together, but I can get a decent understanding of how it works just because everything is labeled, which is a rarity in modern electronics. So I do want to thank Retro6 for that. Keep doing what you guys are doing. That's great stuff. The funny playing board did not do as well. That's not to say this isn't a good board. It is, but I would have appreciated some more debugging options and testing options like on Retro 6's RePCB, because if you have seen Retro 6's RePCB line, there's all sorts of testing stuff you can do to really troubleshoot their boards, which is really helpful for, repairers and people who just advocate for being able to fix their stuff. That's not to say that this isn't a good board, and it's very serviceable, just like the original, but it would be nice to have some schematics or labels on this board as well on Funny Playing's side. But I can't complain too much because it looks really nice, and I do appreciate the work that they did do. It is worth noting that this actually does work with an EverDrive, so that is good to hear as well. I have a Crix EverDrive in here as well, so we can go ahead and get some games going just to test this thing out. Alright, so I went ahead and grabbed one of my other Game Boys that I built about a year and a half ago. This is completely Funny Playing parts except for a Retro 6 cleanup in here. And I just wanted to compare the Funny Playing screen against the Retro 6 screen that I have installed here. So we're going to turn them both on at the same time and see if you guys can tell a difference. Alright, so the first thing I do have to say is that this clean screen is significantly brighter than Funny Playing's version. However, I have noticed that the colors are a little bit different on each screen. That is to be expected, and it really comes down to a matter of preference. Honestly, I could go with either one. Both of these screens are very good and have a lot of customization options as well. The first thing we're going to take a look at is the menus on each of these screens. So first, to open the menu on the Funny Playing screen, you just hold down the select button and it brings up this very robust menu here with 15 different brightness levels. You also have several color mode options between this more saturated and this other color mode. I'm not really sure what to call this, but depending on which one you like, you can alternate between these two. You also have a black and white option as well as a pea soup green like the original Game Boy. I personally like to keep it on this one. You can also move over to the display options where you have options for the pixel grid, which is very nice to have if you like to recreate the original pixel grid of the original Game Boy Advance. I personally like to keep it on the full display though, so that way you can see all of these in a much higher resolution. Then you can turn on frame blending as well. And that's really all the options you have for this screen. It is a little bit more limited than the Retro 6 screen. The Retro 6 screen has a few more options. To access the Retro 6 screen, you hold down the select button as well as the two triggers to bring up the menu. The first thing I will note is that the brightness level is much more adjustable than the Funny Playing screen. See how customizable it is? You can really adjust it to whatever you want. It's very smooth, and you don't have to pick between levels like you do on this one. Next we have color mode, just like on the Funny Playing screen. We have the 4 standard color modes, just like the Funny Playing one. This more desaturated option, and it's just kind of whichever one you have a preference for, as well as the black and white and the pea soup green. The next thing is pixel grids. We have 3 pixel grid options, just like the Funny Playing one. But like I said, this one is significantly brighter, so you can really see the pixel grid effect a lot better. The next feature of the Retro 6 screen that the Funny Playing screen does not have is Screen Align. So you can adjust the left and right values of your screen, so you can really move it if you really want to move it, or if it's not centered when you buy it, you can center it much better. I will admit that when this one came in, it was not centered. So I had to move it all the way over to the far left on the lowest setting in order to have it fully centered, but it is a great option to have. Next option is True Motion, which I believe is just this screen's version of frame blending. And we're back to the brightness. I really have to say that these are both solid picks for screens. However, I do have to admit that the only thing that the Funny Playing screen really does better than the Retro 6 screen is it does have this Game Boy Advance logo, which does keep it true to the original device. I really do like that. It's nice, it's holographic, whereas Retro 6 has their own logo. It's not a huge point dock for me, honestly, but I do like that this one has the original holographic logo on it. I'm sure there are some complications though with putting another company's logo on your screen, so I'm not sure what the legalities of that are. I'm not a lawyer, so it is just something to note if you are a fan. However, I do believe on Retro 6's website, the non-laminated versions you can buy with a Game Boy Advance logo rather than the Retro 6 one. So if you are into that, you can certainly get the Retro 6 screen with a Game Boy Advance logo. I will be honest, my favorite thing about this screen is that it does not have a touch sensor. It's really annoying on the Funny Playing one, and if anyone from Funny Playing ends up watching this, I really hope you make it optional or remove it entirely. It's really not my favorite feature on those screens. I understand it's meant to make it more comfortable, but honestly, it kind of makes the whole experience a little frustrating. And that's not to say everything about Funny Playing is all bad. Like I said, this still is a great option to use if you want to opt for it. I just prefer the Retro 6 screen a little more. However, I do like a lot of the other products that Funny Playing does make, like this motherboard. This is an absolutely fantastic motherboard. The built-in amp is fantastic. The gold contacts, although not entirely necessary, do give it a more premium look. As well as combined with the purple, it really makes it feel like a kind of a royal Game Boy, if that makes sense. Do appreciate how easy everything was to solder, and the compatibility options for the screen controls that I was able to solder between these two different companies. Like I said, Funny Playing motherboard in here, Retro 6 screen. I do appreciate the very fun boot up animation that these LEDs have, how they kind of match with the screen. It is very fun. I also like that you can change the LEDs to pretty much any color you want, whenever you want. It's a bit of a complex system to change them, but Funny Playing does have it all laid out in their website. So that's it for this video. Everything on this console looks absolutely fantastic, and I am very happy that I was able to completely turn a rusted, falling apart console back into something that can be viewed with pride again. I am going to keep this console in my personal collection because I have grown a little bit attached to it. I actually do really enjoy how this thing looks, and I am proud of the CPU transplant I was able to do on this as well. So this will remain in my personal collection, but if you would like to send in your own console for repair, you can head to retroreviverepair.com and check out what we offer on our website. Or you can leave a comment on this video as well if you would like to set something up, maybe send your console in, or have a custom job like this done as well. Make sure you also subscribe to the channel if you get a minute. I would really appreciate that. It really helps me out and keeps me doing what I'm doing. I'd like to thank you all for watching and have a good one. Bye-bye.